So tonight, what we're moving into is a new section, and we're again talking about complex trauma. And one of the things that I wanted to say about that is when people hear the word complex trauma, the first thought often is that he's saying that this child or this person must have had an awful life, a life full of trauma. And what the point I've been trying to make is that with complex trauma, it doesn't necessarily mean you've had an awful life. It could mean that. But what it does mean is that there is one thing or two things in a child's life on an ongoing basis that cause them not to feel safe, that caused them to feel they needed to be on guard or they were going to get hurt. And that is complex trauma, and we've been looking at the fact that for addicts, 90% of addicts grew up in a home or in a situation at school where they were experiencing complex trauma. So what we've looked at so far is the two results of complex trauma. The first was that it affects how I view myself, and that was that very heavy night where we looked at the topic of shame. And then for the last 2 weeks, we've looked at complex trauma affects how I cope with life, and we went through 24 characteristics that come out of complex trauma that affect how you cope. And now tonight we're moving to a third result, which is complex trauma affects how I relate to others. And I want to tonight give the two things that I believe complex trauma does that are the most painful and do the most damage, and you will see that they often set relationships up so that they're not healthy. So this might be a little bit heavy again, and I don't know any other way to present it than the way the facts are. I just hope that you're able to talk about it with friends and kind of process what you're learning. So what I want you to understand is a big picture to set up for tonight is this. One way to understand complex trauma is that complex trauma always happens within relationships. So you could have trauma where you're in an accident, let's say. There's no relationships involved. But when it comes to complex trauma, you could have a relationship that inflicts the damage, or you could have, let's say, an accident, but then the people you look up to meet your needs do not comfort you and help you in dealing with that accident. And so that's the trauma piece, is that it's within relationships that it happens. There's two things that kind of explain what happens in this trauma. A lot of research in the last 10 years has started to come out because people have begun to realize how big these two things are. The first is this. We are all born with this deep desire to emotionally attach, to emotionally bond with our parents. And what I mean by that is to emotionally attach means that you're able to relate to another person at the deepest level. There's true intimacy, and you have no need to wear masks, you have no need to have walls up, but you are able to be totally open with them. For a child, what that means is that they grow up, they feel totally safe being themselves. They can show their little personality, they can fall off their bike and spill the milk, and all of that, they're accepted, nobody is beating them up, nobody is calling them down. It is a very safe world. Now you think of development, you go from infancy to toddlerhood, then you go into school, and then high school, and adult life, all of those different stages of life. What the research is showing is that a child doesn't need to bond just as a baby. They need attachment with their parent at every single stage of life. And if that attachment is disrupted, or if it doesn't occur at all, that is complex trauma. So complex trauma is simply a child who is not able to form a healthy attachment with their parents, and that creates trauma. The second piece that is becoming more and more clear is what makes trauma trauma. You will have a soldier, two soldiers that go to Afghanistan to fight, both go through the exact same horror. One comes back with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and the other comes back and he's okay. He deals with it in a healthy way and goes on with his life. And so they both had the trauma, but what caused one to deal with it well and the other not? And it is that they had support people in their life that they trusted, that were safe, that were nurturing. And if they didn't have that, that's what created the trauma. And so when it comes to complex trauma, what we are realizing is what makes it complex is that the child feels all alone in facing the world. They haven't bonded or attached with mom or dad in a consistent, healthy way, and so they feel all alone. And to a child, they feel abandoned. And so what I want you to understand tonight is one way of understanding complex trauma is that it's all about failure to attach in a healthy way and feeling abandoned. Now, those are causes. Now, let me show you what comes out of that. Because what comes out of that is two very powerful characteristics that affect people with complex trauma. So, number one, and most of you can check this one off and put a star beside it, all kinds of stars beside it. You have a deep desire for intimacy or healthy attachment, but you're scared to death of it. You want so badly to attach, to connect, to have healthy intimacy, but that thought scares you to death. And that affects how you approach relationships. Secondly, when you go into a relationship, you have a huge fear that the person, once they get to know you, will abandon you. They'll find out what you're really like, and they go, oh, how did I pick this loser? And they'll be gone. And that fear has a profound effect on how you approach the relationship. And those two things, the desire for intimacy and fear of it, and a fear of abandonment, set up relationships to not be healthy and to eventually fail. So the really heavy news is what complex trauma does, and we're going to see it more next week as well, is it sets a person up to only have unhealthy relationships. And that to me is painful, it's a tragedy, but it becomes an important thing to understand so that you can begin to work your way through it. So let's look at this whole attachment topic to begin with. So here's the dilemma. Many of you that didn't attach with somebody in your life, you went through a time where you longed to be accepted, you longed to belong, you longed to be loved, and it wasn't happening, and your approach was, well, it just doesn't matter to me, I don't care. And you tried to push it down and go the whatever route. No, I don't need anybody, I don't need love, and you went down that road. But what you find is there's a desire deeper than that that keeps working away inside of you. There's a longing for some type of emotional attachment. There's a longing for intimacy. And so what you did was, many of you may not realize you did it, but what happened was you said, okay, I want intimacy as long as I don't get hurt. So is there a way that I can get intimacy but never get hurt? That's the dilemma. And then what you do with that is, okay, what I'm going to aim for is I'm going to do stuff where I get what feels like intimacy but isn't really intimacy. It's pseudo-intimacy, and that way I won't get hurt. And so if you want to understand addiction, and all the research again is just pointing to what addicts have understood, is addiction is actually an attempt to emotionally attach to something. And what is going on inside of a person with complex trauma is this, is I need to attach. And if I can't attach in a healthy way, I will attach in another way. I will find something to attach to. So when you come across drugs or alcohol or gambling or food, you go, I feel connected. I feel whole. I feel okay. And there's a warmth, there's a sense of completeness. That's emotional attachment. Now let me add this. If a person wants to deal successfully with addiction, you have to address this attachment thing. And in my experience as a counselor, is if a person doesn't learn to attach to another human being in a healthy way, it is very unlikely that they will stay clean and sober for a very long time. It is that important of an issue. Okay, before you get to addiction, here are some of the pseudo forms of attachment. And many of you will quickly relate to it, but barroom intimacy. Everybody's happy, everybody's laughing, there's hugs, and there's all that sense of closeness, and you get to the end of the night, you go, oh, that was so wonderful, these are my buds. And you go, I don't even know their names, I don't know anything about them, I just feel close. Okay? You get that with sports as well. And again, in sports, it's the only time you ever see men hug each other, basically, and pat each other on the bottom, and go, wow, we're all buddies and bros and all of that stuff. And you get to the end, I don't know if they got a wife, I don't know if they got kids, I don't know where they work, but boy, we scored a goal together, and we're close. That kind of intimacy happens. Laughter is a wonderful thing that creates a feeling of intimacy. And so that's why many people like to make others laugh, because everybody, once they're laughing, they let down their guard a little bit, they warm up emotionally, and they feel close to others. But there's no true intimacy there. Others are just very good at talking in a way that causes people's emotions to get warmed up. All false forms of intimacy. Some of you might experience what I call kind of intimacy on one topic. And you'll get this a lot in recovery. You go to a meeting and people talk at great depth about their recovery. Great depth about what they're struggling with. But that's the only thing you know about them. You don't know about the rest of their life. And so you feel close. But if you're honest, it's only about one topic. And so that happens a lot. And some people get drawn into the same thing when it comes to spiritual stuff. They can talk for hours with somebody else about what they're learning, about what's touching their heart, and they feel really, really close. Now, it's not to say all of that is totally bad. There's a place for it. But what I'm saying is if you think that's the true intimacy, it's not. It's a form of pseudo-intimacy. A common thing today, and many of you might relate to it, but we live in an age of Facebook and texting and cell phones, and I watch young people on their phone constantly, and they get to the end of the day, and they've sent like 1,000 texts to this other person. They've been texting constantly all day. And they go, we're so close. But do you realize how much of a fiction world, a fantasy world texting creates? There's not necessarily any real sharing. You're just saying, oh, I just stopped and got an ice cream cone. Oh, there's a weird guy on the bus, and you're texting about, and it's not real, true, healthy intimacy. And you can phone and talk about what dress or clothes you're going to wear and what you're going to do with your hair and on, but that's not necessarily intimacy. One of the things that complex trauma family did to try to create the belief that they had intimacy was they did everything together. So you have a family outing, everybody does everything together, and you'll see we're a really, really close family. Meanwhile, you don't trust each other. You never get honest with each other, but you do everything together. That's not true intimacy. And then a famous one is, well, we'll just talk about everybody else. That's gossip. And so we'll have great conversations about how screwed up George is and how messed up in the love life of Susan over there. But wow, we're close. We can share about everybody else. Not true. Intimacy. A common one, and it's becoming more and more understood, but sex can be nothing more than pseudo-intimacy, the one-night stand, or porn. And all of that creates feelings of intimacy without the relationship. And so it's not true intimacy. And for some people growing up, there was the promiscuity where you felt in those moments when you had sex with somebody else, you felt close, but again, there was no true intimacy. A difficult one to talk about, it's emotional incest. And what emotional incest is when a parent shares with a child stuff that the child is not capable or shouldn't be having to carry. And so they might talk to the child about how bad their dad is, or their the husband is. They might share their struggles with suicide. And the little child isn't able to bear that load. And it's too much. But some parents do that because they have nobody else to talk to. And then they say to the child, we are so close, we talk about everything. And the child is saying, I wish you wouldn't. Because you're driving me crazy. I am worried half the night because of what you're sharing with me. And then the final one I want to mention is what I call an intimacy addict. I don't know if you've ever met somebody that as soon as you say, hi, how are you? They want to go like really deep. And you're going to just ask how you were. That's kind of a general term we use in our culture. You're supposed to say, fine, thank you, how are you? Not go and start telling me about everything that's happened in the last week. And then what happens is their intimacy is really, they finally get somebody to listen to them while they talk about themselves only. As soon as you want to talk about what's happening in your week, their eyes glaze over, they look around, and they get up and walk away. And you go, whoa, I just listened to you. You get what I mean? So that is what I would call pseudo-intimacy. Now I want to give you an illustration that I hope will help you. Imagine that you were created with this built-in need for Pepsi. For some reason, you were created that Pepsi met some of your deepest needs in your physical body, okay? But you grew up in a home where you don't have any Pepsi, and so you don't even know you have this need for Pepsi. And you live with this deep thirst, but you don't know what it's about. You try different things. Nothing seems to satisfy. And then one day, somebody gives you a Coca-Cola. Not exactly a Pepsi, but close. Now, some of you who are Pepsi addicts are going, how can you say Coke is close to Pepsi? Wait, follow the illustration, okay? They're both colas. And so you drink Coca-Cola, and you go, oh, that feels so good. It's like all of a sudden, these needs you didn't know you had seem to be getting met. And so you're feeling this reaction inside of you where you just feel warm and complete, and finally, I found what satisfies. And so now you drink Coca-Cola every day. But there's a problem. It's not genuine Pepsi. And so you're drinking Coca-Cola, and you're getting a little bit of a satisfying effect, but not a total satisfying effect. And it seems to get less and less as you go along. And so let's say somebody comes up to you and says, you don't need Coca-Cola. That's your problem. You're drinking the wrong stuff. And you go, what? You don't know what Coke does to me. It makes me feel good. It satisfies me. And they go, no, Coke isn't what you want. You need Pepsi, and you think they're crazy. But that's what begins to happen. Inside, as you work through this, everybody that would say Coke is a problem for you, your brain says, nope, that seems to work just fine. I need Coke. I don't need Pepsi. Okay, now let's apply that. What I'm saying is true intimacy is Pepsi. And many of you grew up where there wasn't true intimacy, but you were created for a need for it. And then at some point, somebody introduced you to Coca-Cola, which is pseudo-intimacy, and you go, this satisfies. And now you're getting to a point in your life where you're going, it's satisfying less and less. It's not cutting it anymore. It's leaving me thirsty afterwards. And the point I want you to get is because you're drinking pseudo-intimacy and your body craves true intimacy. But that's the problem, because what kicks in at this point is, okay, I want true intimacy, but I'm afraid of it because then I might get hurt. And that's what it always boils down to. Let me add one other piece to this Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola illustration. If you go back and think of love, love is a healthy action that cares about your needs and meeting those needs with a healthy motive, okay? Coca-Cola is the guy that says, I'm going to buy you roses, I'm going to listen to you for hours, I'm going to help you with baby, all of that so I can get in your pants. That's good action, unhealthy motive. Coca-Cola, problem is it feels like love. It feels like the real thing. And that's the problem. And so when somebody comes along and says, you really need Pepsi, which is healthy action with the right motive, you go, that's too scary. And so you stay with the Coca-Cola. Your brain doesn't know initially the difference between unhealthy love, which is nice action, wrong motive, and healthy love, nice action, right motive. You have to begin to sort that out for yourself. Okay, the next thing I want to cover is this abandonment, fear of abandonment, and how it affects relationships. And I want to just emphasize, in my mind, the fear of abandonment motivates people, controls people, drives people, and they don't even realize it. And so what I want to do right now is try to give you a whole bunch of things that will help you see if the fear of abandonment is actually controlling your relationships and how you act in those relationships. So let's begin with the person who's been abandoned says, if the two people that brought me into the world, the two, mom and dad, the two people that are supposed to love me, if they abandon me, then I'm pretty sure everybody else is going to abandon me. So you have that as a core belief inside of you, and then you begin to expect to be abandoned in every relationship that you get into. That's how deep it goes. And then sometimes what happens is you will actually push people away and force them to abandon you just to prove your theory. And I'll show that in a minute. So number one strategy that we use so that we avoid abandonment is I'm not going to let anybody get to know me. I'm going to have all my masks on and the walls up, because if they get to know me, I'm pretty sure they're going to abandon me, and I'm not going to let that happen. So I'm going to have all the walls and masks in place. Here's what I want you to see. When you have the fear of abandonment, you end up creating the thing you're trying to avoid. Because what happens is the person tries to get to know you. Let's say it's a healthy person, and they run into a wall. They find out you're wearing mask after mask. They ask you to take them off. They ask you to get real. They encourage you to get honest. You refuse. After a while, they say, you know what? I wish you the best, but I can't put any more energy into this. And they walk away. And you go, see, proves they all abandoned me. But you created it. Okay, that's kind of the big picture. The next one. You go into relationships with these unrealistic expectations or standards that you have in your head that you think will prevent abandonment, okay? And so a very subtle belief is, if this person won't abandon me, that means they must love only me. If they have love even to one of their kids, or to a friend from childhood, or to their parents, they're going to abandon me soon because they love somebody else. And so what you begin to think is, the only way I can guarantee they won't abandon me is if they love only me. That makes sense in your head, but you realize how unrealistic that is? And what that will do as far as creating conflict in the relationship and getting them to the point where they just feel so controlled and so smothered that they walk away. Because you demand only that they love you. Second one is, they will never abandon me if they're perfect. But if I find one flaw, or if they fail me once, and by the way, I will be looking for flaws, and I will even create flaws, but if they disappoint me or have a flaw, that proves they're like everybody else, and everybody else has abandoned me, so they're going to abandon me. So you go looking for perfection, expecting to find flaws, and you just destroy it all again. Next one. If they are committed to me and I need to know constantly that they love me and they're validating me, that I'm the most special person in their life, that they love my laugh, they love my personality, they love everything about me. And I need constant validation, and if for 1 minute they don't validate me, my brain goes, they're planning to leave because they didn't validate me. And you just set it up again. Next one. If they don't give me constant attention, so they want to spend every spare minute with me. If they ever want to have a night just to be at home and do some watch TV or to go out with some friends, they're planning to leave me. Because they're not wanting to spend every spare minute with me. Again, what have you done? You set a standard that creates abandonment. Because it's unrealistic and it drives the other person away. The flip side of that, if you were to ask them, can I borrow $100? And they say, sorry. You go, see, they don't love me. They just set a boundary. They're abandoning me. And so what fear of abandonment says is you can have no boundaries with me. I can call you at 3 in the morning, every morning, and you have to answer the phone because I need to talk. And if you say, you know what, you can wait till 7 when I get up. See, you don't love me. Boundaries. Big thing that you do not know how to handle. And then, if you're not going to abandon me, that means you can never give me any constructive criticism. You can't point out a flaw in me. Because if you do, my brain says, you're looking for a way out. You're starting to find fault with me, and now you're backing away from me. So you have to always say nothing but positive. And then the next one, if you get annoyed with me and you get a little angry with me, that means you're starting to get fed up with the relationship. You're planning to leave it. See all that's happening? Okay, let me give you a couple more. What you begin to think often is this. You know what? They may end up being perfect and never fail me, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to disappoint them someday. And I'm going to fail them, and they're going to say, oh, what a jerk, I'm gone. So since I'm going to do it someday, I might as well just end it now. And I might as well sabotage the whole thing. Or, another thing that happens is you might, for the first time, take a risk of sharing with them something very personal that you've never shared with anybody before. And then after you share it and you go home, all night you're, I wonder what they think of me now. I bet you they're lying in their bed going, what in the world did I just get myself into? This is a loser. And you go all of worst case scenario stuff in your head, and that's just what goes on in your head. You see what a fear of abandonment did there? It just set you up to basically destroy a relationship. Okay, we're not done yet. The next thing people with a fear of abandonment do is they start playing games. And so what they go is the person is saying they love me and they'll never abandon me. Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to push them away. I don't want to talk to you today. I'm mad at you today. And blah, 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 blah. And you push, push, push. They reach out. They don't want to talk about it. And you do all your little things to keep them pushed away. And then you go, okay, let's see what they do. And if they walk away, like you said, I don't want to see you anymore, then you go, whoa, what's wrong with them? Instead of, I just brought that on myself. But that fear of abandonment starts you in this pushing game, or you start pushing buttons. So I'm going to talk about an old fling that I had, and I'm going to see how it affects them. And I'm going to talk about what I did stupid, and I'm going to see, and I'm going to try to get them angry by doing what I know bugs them. And you're playing a game. Why? Because you're convinced deep down that they're going to abandon you eventually. So let's just get it on and get it over with. And so you start that pushing down. The other thing that often happens is you go, I don't know why you love me, I'm such a loser. I can't do anything right. Put yourself down, put yourself down. And after a while, the guy's sitting there going, yeah, I don't know why I love you either. Like, you got a problem. But it's the putting yourself down. Or you're questioning their love. And they say, I love you. You go, no, you don't really love me. You're just saying that. Meanwhile, you're saying, tell me again. And you play all of that kind of stuff. And the guy doesn't know what to expect on any given day. They're putting themselves down, pushing me away, questioning my love, questioning everything I say. All of that kind of stuff happens because of fear of abandonment. Okay, we're not done yet. You guys are really good at this. You make negative conclusions about their motives. So it's not what they did. You kind of make conclusions about why they did it, okay? So they're nice to you, and you go, they're just using me. Now, they might be using you. You need to check that out. But let's say over a long period of time, it's become obvious this person isn't using you. They really love you, and they're doing stuff because they love you with no strings attached, but you're still saying, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't fit my little equation that everybody uses me and abandons me. So they must be using me. I just have to find out where. And so you go looking even harder. But that's your assumption. Or you go, you know what? They say such nice things to me. I bet you as soon as they go out with their buddies, they're talking behind my back. He's telling them what a jerk I am. I'm pretty sure that must be happening. And you create this scenario in your head, and you begin to believe it. And then you go, they say, excuse me, nice things, but I bet you deep down he doesn't really believe it. Or I bet you they've got about 20 filters in place whenever they say anything to me. So they start out, I need to say this really honest thing. No, filter 1, we're going to soften it up. Filter 2, no, we're going to say it this way. And by the end, they just say nice things. And it's gone through 19 filters, so that means they don't really mean anything they say. And you got that all figured out in your head. So guess what you've just done? You've set up a system in you that enables you to doubt true love and to always end up with abandonment. And that destroys relationships. Now, if you haven't done any of those, or maybe you've done all of those, there's always a fail-safe one. They're going to die someday, so they will abandon me. Proof. There, good. I don't need to have a relationship with them because they're only going to abandon me someday. Isn't that sad? It's kind of sick funny, but it's really sad. And I hope that you begin to realize is that when you look at this attachment problem and the abandonment issue, you have a person who goes into relationships unable to have healthy relationships, and actually creating relationships that will fail. And that is such a sad tragedy. So hopefully we're going to get time eventually to say, okay, what do I do about this stuff? You just beat me up again, and I'm going home with my tail between my legs and my lip dragging on the ground, knowing I'm screwed up even worse. I would just say, start with this. Be aware of how much you do some of this stuff. And start to catch yourself and just say, okay, what is going on here? And as you get insight into that, you can begin to talk with others and begin to make changes. But we'll get into much more detail in the future. Let's just pray. Father, this is again such difficult stuff, and it's so painful when a person wants to have a healthy relationship so bad and they just are their own worst enemy. And I pray that you would just help each person to know where to turn next and what to do next. Amen.